Welcome back, Fanfield family. Ready for another episode of the Elder Scrolls Reading Club? Today's episode of the Elder Scrolls Reading Club is going to look at a book that I haven't read in a while, not since my first playthrough of Morrowind in the early 2000s. You voted for it, so let's get to it. No music played in the nameless tavern and Sentinel, and indeed there was very little sound except for discreet, cautious murmurs of conversation, the soft pad of the barmaid's feet on stone, and the delicate slurping of the regular patrons. Eyes focused on nothing at all. If anyone were less otherwise occupied, the sight of the young Redguard woman in a fine black velvet cape might have aroused surprise, even suspicion. As it were, the strange figure, out of place in an underground cellar so modest it had no sign, blended into the shadows. "Are you Jomik?" The stout, middle-aged man with a face older than his years looked up and nodded. He returned to his drink. The young woman took the seat next to him. "My name is Habala," she said, and pulled out a small bag of gold, placing it next to his mug. "Sure it be," snarled Jomik, and met her eyes again. "Who do you want dead?" She did not turn away, but merely asked, "Is it safe to talk here? No one cares about nobody else's problems but their own here. You could take off your cuirass and dance bare-breasted on the table and no one would even spit," the man smiled. "So who do you want dead?" "No one, actually," said Habala. "The truth is, I only want someone removed for a while. Not harmed, you understand, and that's why I need a professional. You come highly recommended." "Who you been talking to?" asked Jomik dully, returning to his drink. "A friend of a friend of a friend of a friend." "One of them friends don't know what he's talking about," grumbled the man. "I don't do that anymore." Habala quietly took out another purse of gold, and then another, placing them at the man's elbow. He looked at her for a moment, and then poured the gold out and began counting. As he did, he asked, "Who do you want removed?" "Just a moment," smiled Habala, shaking her head. "Before we talk details, I want to know that you're a professional, and you won't harm this person very much, and that you'll be discreet." "You want discreet?" The man paused in his counting. "All right, I'll tell you about an old job of mine. It's been, by Arche, I can hardly believe it, more than 20 years, and no one but me's alive who had anything to do with the job. This is back afore the time of the War of Bettany, remember that? I was just a baby." "Course you was," Jomik smiled. "Everyone knows that King Loten had an older brother, Greklith, what died, right? And then he's got his older sister, Albke, what married that king fella in Daggerfall. But the truth's that he had two elder brothers." "Really?" Habala's eyes glistened with interest. "No lie," he chuckled. "Weedy, feeble fella called Arthago, the king and queen's firstborn. Anyhow, this prince was heir to the throne, which his parents wasn't too thrilled about, but then the queen, she squeezed out two more princes who looked a lot more fit. That's when me and my boys got hired on, to make it look like the first prince got took off by the Underking or some such story." "I had no idea," the young woman whispered. "Of course you didn't, that's the point," Jomik shook his head. "Discretion, like you said. We bagged the boy, dropped him off deep in an old ruin, and that was that. No fuss, just a couple of fellas, a bag, and a club." "That's what I'm interested in," said Habala. "Technique. My friend who needs to be taken away is weak also, like this prince. What is the club for?" "It's a tool. So many things what was better in the past ain't around no more, just 'cause people today prefer ease of use to what works right. Let me explain. There are 71 prime pain centers in an average fella's body. Elves and Khajiit, being so sensitive and all, got 3 and 4 more respectively. Argonians and Slodes, almost as many, at 52 and 67. Jomik used his short stubby finger to point out each region on Habala's body. 6 in your forehead, 2 in your brow, 2 on your nose, 7 in your throat, 10 in your chest, 9 in your abdomen, 3 on each arm, 12 in your groin, 4 in your favored leg, 5 in the other." "That's 63, replied Habala. "No, it's not," growled Jomik. "Yes, it is," the young lady cried back, indignant that her mathematical skills were being questioned. 6 plus 2 plus 2 plus 7 plus 10 plus 9 plus 3 for one arm and 3 for the other plus 12 plus 4 plus 5, 63. "I must have left some out," shrugged Jomik. "The important thing is that to become skilled with a staff or club, you gotta be a master of these pain centers. Done right, a light tap could kill or knock out without so much as a bruise." "Fascinating," smiled Habala. "And no one ever found out?" "Why would they? The boy's parents, the king and queen, they're both dead now. The other children always thought their brother got carried off by the Underking. That's what everyone thinks. And all my partners are dead." "Of natural causes?" "Ain't nothing natural that ever happens in the bay, you know that. One fella got sucked up by one of them Selinu. Another died of that same plague that took the queen and Prince Greklith. Another fella got himself beat up to death by a burglar. You gotta keep low, out of sight like me if you want to stay alive." Jomik finished counting the coins. "You must want this fella out of the way bad. Who is it?" "It's better if I show you," said Habala, standing up. Without a look back, she strode out of the nameless tavern. Jomik drained his beer and went out. The night was cool, with an unrestrained wind surging off the water of the Iliac Bay, sending leaves flying like whirling shards. Habala stepped out of the alleyway next to the tavern and gestured to him. As he approached her, the breeze blew open her cape, revealing the armor beneath and the crest of the King of Sentinel. The fat man stepped back to flee, but she was too fast. In a blur, he found himself in the alley on his back, the woman's knee pressed firmly against his throat. The king has spent years since he took the throne looking for you and your collaborators, Jomek. His instructions to me what to do when I found you were not specific, but you've given me an idea. From her belt, Habala removed a small, sturdy cudgel. A drunk stumbling out of the bar heard a whimpered moan accompanied by a soft whisper coming from the darkness of the alley. Let's keep better count this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. As ever, let's talk about some key terms before we get into the discussion proper. Sentinel is the capital city of the Kingdom of Sentinel, one of the kingdoms in the province of Hammerfell. Hammerfell is the homeland of the Red Guards, dark-skinned humans known for their martial skill and brilliant battlefield tactics. Arche is one of the 9 Divines, a group of deities worshipped by many cultures in the Elder Scrolls world. He is associated with the Circle of Life and Death and is often regarded as a protector of mortals. His priests are staunch opponents of necromancy and all forms of undead. His worship is practiced most commonly in Hammerfell. The War of Bethany was a year-long conflict between the kingdoms of Sentinel and Daggerfall in Hammerfell. The Underking was a manipulative, evil undead that pulled the strings of political leaders from the shadows for several hundred years. While little is truly known about him, it's likely that he was a lich, as stories say that his heart disappeared and without it he could not live or die. That sounds to me a lot like a phylactery in Dungeons & Dragons, an artifact that an aspiring lich will put their soul into, allowing their body to persist long after it should die. Elves, also known as Mer, are an overarching category to describe a number of races in the Elder Scrolls world. Mer directly translates to folk, so the various elven races are named with a descriptor and then Mer as a suffix. So, for example, we talked about the Dwemer in the last episode. Their name directly translates to deep folk, referring to their proclivity for residing in deep mines and fortresses. Khajiit, singular Khajiit, are the catfolk of Elsewhere. They're an ancient people and they venerate the 2 moons. Curiously, the phases of the moons when a child is conceived dictate its fur stock or the specific type of Khajiit, not the genetics of the parents. This does suggest a strong divine connection to the moons. Among these 17 fur stocks, a handful are not bipedal. The Alfeek, for example, are shaped and sized like house cats, Senchai are the size of tigers, and so on. Generally, when a story does not take place in Elsewhere, it's referring to the Suthe Rot, the first stock of Khajiit seen in Morrowind, or Cathay, which are what we see in Oblivion and Skyrim. They're really fascinating, and I hope we get a game entirely set in Elsewhere someday. Argonians are the lizard folk of Blackmarsh, also known as Argonia. They tend to be skilled mages, are naturally immune to poison, can breathe underwater, and excel at stealth. Argonians born under the sign of the Shadow, known as Shadow Scales, are offered at birth to the Dark Brotherhood, an organization of assassins that operates all across Tamriel. Slode are a race of toad or slug-like aquatic beings. They can grow to massive sizes, are generally rather obese, and their culture is based heavily on the art of necromancy, something that most other races frown upon. This has led the Slode to be reviled by much of the Elder Scrolls world. The Selenu are a vampire bloodline from the Iliac Bay, a body of water to the northwest of Hammerfell. I see a few important takeaways here. The biggest one, however, sort of ties into the idea of karma that we discussed last time. If you do evil things, it's gonna catch up to you eventually. Jomek was a man that didn't care what he was assigned to do as long as he got paid enough for it. That led him to take the rather dark job of abducting the prince that was in line to take the throne, on orders from the prince's parents, and murder the young man. However, the prince's brother Loten, concerned about Arthago's disappearance, eventually found his brother's remains and his final words, scrawled on a note. 12 years later, when Loten inherited the throne, he had his agents track down and eliminate all of the surviving conspirators. Ironically, the method of murder Jomek and his fellow thugs used is ultimately the same way that Habala killed him, which is just the cherry on top of this karma sundae. The other big lesson here is to not be too trusting. Sure, it's important to have some trust your friends, your family, but don't just blindly trust anyone and everyone that you meet. A cloaked woman sits down next to Jomek in a seedy tavern, drops some gold at his side, and asks to be told all about his art of using blunt weapons for murder, then asks him to follow her outside. Now, it could be the alcohol, or maybe Habala just has a really believable poker face, but Jomek doesn't think twice. He just says to himself, she wants me to follow her outside and away from everyone else. Seems legit. His over-trusting of a random woman he just met leads to his death. The final, smaller lesson is that skill and technique can make a world of difference. Anyone can swing a club around, but Jomek explains the vast gap in capability between a common thug with a blackjack and a master of the art. His quick summary of that kind of mastery is, done right, a light tap could kill or knock out without so much as a bruise. Jomek mentions prime pain centers. This is likely a nod to the Hindu concept of chakras, basically focal points of our connection between the physical world and the divine. This is a recurring thing in fiction as well. We see this in things like the absolutely fantastic cartoon Avatar: The Last Airbender and its sequel Legend of Korra. Chi blockers are able to strike specific points on a target's body to incapacitate them or even shut off their elemental manipulation skills. Chakra points also come up in Naruto as nodes of the network through which chakra flows. Jomic explains that by understanding these pain centers, one can render a subject unconscious without so much as a bruise or kill effortlessly. That's the difference between a novice and a master, that level of skill, understanding, and commitment. Night Falls on Sentinel can be found in 2 guaranteed places in Morrowind. First, Gorak Manor in Caldera, which is probably the safer place if you want to read it right after starting the game. The other guaranteed location is in Sorkvild's Tower, a Dwemer tower just east of Dagon Fell. This tower has a handful of low to mid-level enemies, and Sorkvild himself is pretty dangerous given his magic. However, interestingly, the book is one of very few items in his tower that's not flagged as belonging to him, so if you can sneak in and pick it up, it's not counted as stolen. As a skill book, it'll permanently boost your blunt weapon skill by 1 point the first time you read it. It can also be found in Oblivion and Skyrim. The book is a reference to a quest in the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall called The Missing Prince. I've yet to play Daggerfall, so I'm not as informed on the background of the quest. Any of my viewers who have played Daggerfall, please feel free to let me know your thoughts about it down in the comments. So that's Night Falls on Sentinel. What did you think of this story? Have you ever found it in-game? Next time, we'll take a look at the Prayers of Baranat, an adventure of a man and his quest to release a kidnapped lady. On Friday, we're going to take a look at one of the most misunderstood creatures in Star Wars. Thank you so much for watching. This series is really turning out to be a lot of fun for me, so I hope you're enjoying it too. If you enjoyed this kind of content, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an upload. A like and a comment are also very much appreciated. There are videos every Tuesday and Friday and shorts on Saturday and Sunday. If you want to check out the whole Elder Scrolls Reading Club playlist, click here. Or click here for a video discussing Count Dooku vs. Mace Windu. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.